Hello and welcome. I'm Jessie CHAHAL. You're watching The Nation. Every click, every online transaction, every connected device that we use today comes with some amount of digital risk. Cybercriminals are no longer just targeting large corporations. They're also going after ordinary, everyday Malaysians, government agencies, as well as critical infrastructure. As Malaysia moves forward with the newly proposed Cybercrime Bill 2026, the key question we ask today is this: can this new legislation keep pace with an increasingly complex and ever-evolving cyber threat landscape? Well, joining us to unpack this legislation is MURUGASON THANGARATNAM, the Adjunct Professor of Cybersecurity Practice at the University of Computer Science and Engineering. Professor, welcome to The Nation.
Good afternoon, Jessie. It's always a pleasure being on.
Good to have you here with us. We talk about the Cybercrime Bill 2026, but also talk about the rise of AI and the threats, and of course the ongoing issue of scams in the country. To begin with, let's look at how significant this new bill is in Malaysia's digital policy landscape, especially when we compare it to Computer Crimes Act 1997, in which it's being replaced.
Well, Jessie, I mean, it's a much needed upgrade, obviously, because, it has to match the world we're living in, because the earlier act is almost 30 years. Next year, it becomes 30 years old. So it's definitely a much needed upgrade, and it brings Malaysia's cyber law into the from the era of basic computer offences into the reality of AI and identity theft, deep fakes, cross-border digital crime. So things have changed. The landscape has changed. The way in which attacks are being constructed today has exponentially grown. There's more unknown than known. So obviously that's another challenge. And the other thing is the bill is not merely about punishment, but it's about giving the investigators and the prosecutors the legal tools to respond to modern digital crimes. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think that's where I think the thing has changed, because with the threats, as I said, the threats becoming more, you need to also be competent enough. You need to also have the tool to actually fight that cyber war. So I think that's one of the things that the Act is trying to do, and also it signals Malaysia's intent to align ourselves to international standards. And now it's all cross-border. Right. So I think that's one of the things that is done.
So definitely. We talk about the much-needed upgrade of the Act itself into the Cybercrime Bill 2026, which just got the green light. What were in particular the main gaps or limitations within the 1997 Act that made this the much-needed upgrade or the overhaul that's necessary now?
I mean, one immediate example would be, at that point of time, there was no such word as malware, or ransomware. And it did not. It was too narrow for today's threats. There was no cloud platforms at that time. Deep fakes is obviously not. Modern fraud methods. So those were gaps, and fast-moving online abuse. Mm-hmm. Today, because of technology, for example, if you pick up the area of cyberbullying, it's actually empowered the bullies. Those days, you know who the bully is, so you can always tell your dad, and dad will come and give him a tight slap in the school. Today you can't, because your bully is probably sitting down somewhere in Eastern Europe, or you could be sitting down here, or even next door to you. Right. And you're not able to, you may not have the ability to actually find out who your bully is.
Right. So we look at the bill, and it's covering offences that include identity theft, computer-related fraud and forgery, transmission of manipulated content, dissemination of information that is false or untrue. We also have the governing body, I would say, that is in charge of enforcement to some extent, the National Cybersecurity Agency, NACSA. Where does NACSA come in play when we talk about this new bill?
So NACSA is obviously, as far as they are the custodian of the Cybersecurity Act that was passed back in 2024. In terms of the cyber crime bill itself, NACSA is obviously one of the key drivers, but they are working very closely with the police, PDRM, as far as enforcement is concerned, and also they are working very closely with MCMC. Mm-hmm. So these are the three key players as far as to operationalize the cybersecurity bill These are the three main players.
We look at the Cybercrime Bill 2026, and of course this expands to cover areas like AI and AI manipulated content, identity theft. From a legal and technical perspective, how challenging is it to define and regulate these new forms of cybercrime that seem to be ever changing? I mean, the thieves, the scammers, quote unquote, are 2-3 steps ahead of enforcement even.
The reason they are ahead is very simple. They don't have parliament, they don't have lawmakers, they don't have protocols, they don't have procurement officers, they don't have finance departments to worry about.
Red tape.
So they basically don't have red tape. So obviously it's always going to be catch up. And it's not going to be easy to regulate this. The other challenge is obviously whatever platforms you're talking about now, whether it's AI or social media or whether it's something messaging apps and all that, we have to accept the fact that 90% of this technology we don't own. So we're not in a position to make a decision on how secure it is and what it can do. So I think the least we can do is on our side is basically trying to regulate how these platforms operate in Malaysia. How these platforms evolve, how fast it's going to evolve, obviously we don't have control. But how people use it, whether the people are using it responsibly, whether the platform itself fits a certain parameter which we can set. For example, if there's an app that says that has got too many pop-up ads, we on our Malaysian side we can say if you download an app, this app is not a verified app because it has got too many pop-up ads. For example, simple things like that. So we can regulate on our side. We can actually put the guardrails here, but it is going to be challenging to actually regulate it. And obviously, enforcement also requires knowledge and expertise. So we need to have enough people to actually, first of all, identify that this there's something wrong with this. We need to have people with deep forensic capabilities, which unfortunately at the moment as we speak, we don't have enough people. So these are challenges, and these people have to be spread across Malaysia. It should not just be a Klang Valley thing. We are only talking about things in the cities.
Right. So based on that, how has the bill been received by experts such as yourself who speak cybercrime and who look at its prevention and its prevention of its practice here in the country?
Obviously, from a practitioner point of view, acts like this make our lives easier. At least you have a baseline regulation. If not, it's very difficult to talk to people. Humans generally are not good at self-regulation, but once you have regulation, at least you have a baseline. So that gives us, the opening line to when we speak to people and tell them that this is serious. This is an act that you cannot ignore. The punishments are not what they call mild. 7 to 10 years jail sentences and fines up to 2 million. So at least it gives you that baseline. It gives you that. It puts in that seriousness as far as a topic is concerned. But then, how it's enforced, how quickly you enforce, and whether that messaging gets across. That's very important.
So you feel that those questions are still left? It's
still, yeah. So it's still hanging. So we need to see that. You need to have certain case studies on showing that a certain offence had happened, and this is how the government or the enforcement agency has reacted. Naming and shaming is very important as far as this kind of crimes are concerned. You cannot be so and so kind of thing, because then it doesn't, it's swept under the carpet most of the time.
Cannot be coded, pun.
Yeah. So I think we need to know that, So we can already see that sometimes now they actually mention, for example, they mention the name of banks. If there are, some offences, if there's a cybersecurity breach, they actually mention the name of the bank. We never used to do that before. So that is important. So at least it also helps you know. Also keep the people there in guard and make sure that they do the right thing.
While online privacy and security is of course compromised, there's also the financial losses that's involved in terms of cybercrime cases. Looking at the online scams alone in 2025, it reached or surpassed 1 billion ringgit. That's just in the first half of 2025. What is the worst cybercrime case that you've come across?
It's a bit challenging, that question, because as I said, we've just got our acts, and most of the time many of the offences here are not reported because it's also reputation based. But one that comes to mind, if you're talking about from a global one, is obviously a very interesting one where a financial officer transferred 25 million USD on the instruction of his CFO. This was, I think, in Hong Kong. And before transferring, the CFO came online on an online call with a few of the other staff and explained a few things and instructed this guy to transfer that. Later, obviously, they found out this whole thing was the CFO and all the staff on the online call were actually deepfake.
Were all AI generated?
They were all AI generated. So that's how accurate the technology has moved. So that's one case which is often quoted in a lot of forums, in a lot of conferences. Personally, for me, I know of friends who have been scammed, typically through a business email compromise, where they actually send you an invoice from a regular vendor. So you are dealing with a regular vendor, and some of these businesses deal with multiple invoices in a day. And this is a customer who's been with them for a very long time. So a simple email, it's very difficult to identify phishing emails nowadays. It's so accurate because they are also AI generated. And an email came simple saying that the same language, we have just changed our bank account to a different bank. So just pay and the invoice was sent and all that, all as per, as accurate as possible. And he transferred, and they lost about 600,000 in one transaction. And the 600,000 is typically the kind of transaction they do. So there was no suspicion. Only later they found out when the guy who was supposed to receive the money actually called them and told them, I think your payment is a bit late, we still haven't received. So we paid, we got an email, this is the payment, gone into the bank, went into the account, So then obviously it became an investigation, and they managed to find out that the source was in India. So the only option they had was to go to India and make a report at the cyber cell there.
You say that scammers are no longer casting a wide net, that they know exactly who their targets are, even to the extent of knowing the target's bank balance, and therefore it helps them choose who the next victim is.
Yeah, so they can actually, map your income bracket. So it's quite easy. Sometimes, just by getting data from, it doesn't have to be data from a government agency. It could even be a data from your shopping patterns, for example. Many of us here are members of a pharmacy. I think most pharmacies here carry about an average of about 1 million to 2 million Malaysians data. And also your shopping patterns, the way in which you shop, the way in the hotels that you stay, the way in which you spend money. So all these things today, you can actually do this to map the socio-economic position of a person before you target them.
So what happened to the Privacy Act in terms of our personal information, the PDPA, and so on and so forth? Because that seems to be the main loophole that are assisting cybercrime cases.
Sad to say, I have to say it, but privacy is a myth. So today privacy is a myth as it stands. Obviously, again, you're talking about the PDPA, but where is the enforcement? When was the last time you heard of a major fine on an organization on being complacent in storing their data? Because I feel as a data taker, you need to be responsible and accountable.
So we talk about the Cybercrime Bill 2026, which of course is the much needed upgrade, and also a legal tool that will help navigate us through this. But enforcement still remains a major challenge. What are some of that key barriers in terms of investigating and successfully prosecuting cybercrime cases in Malaysia?
I think the one word that comes to mind is speed, how fast you enforce. And I think that's where the challenge is. From the time that the incident happens, how fast you move. So you don't want to be in a position when you are a victim. First of all, you are confused, who do you report to? Do you report to the police? Do you report to MCMC, for example, or do you report to any other agency? So there needs to be a very simple, unified platform for that. Obviously, for scams, we've got this 997 at the moment, but the speed in which you move is very important. So that's been the biggest challenge. And then obviously, you need to also have the capabilities. The enforcement officers must be given the tools and the knowledge to actually identify it very quickly.
So that brings me to my question. How prepared are our enforcement agencies and the forensics teams, their capabilities, and their most upgraded latest training?
Okay. My diplomatic answer would be it's a work in progress, but the problem is, the reality is, how ready are you now? So that's important, Sometimes it doesn't help the cause when you actually tell people that you are preparing yourself, or you're coming up with a blueprint, or you're coming up with a plan to become cyber secure. So basically you're telling the threat actor that you've got a 3-year window, we're still not prepared yet. So that's the reality, and I think even the people out who had the position to draft legislations and who are in the position to regulate, they also realize that it's a challenge, because you can't produce talented people overnight. It has to start somewhere. So I think that's where the challenge is. I think we don't have enough expertise out there. We could work with the private sector. So I often always say we need to have a RELA kind of model for cybersecurity, so where you actually have the private sector comes in as your reserve army in case there is a cyber breach or a cyber attack of a larger scale, which the current enforcement will not be able to handle. So that's the only thing you can look at now. But we need to have a cyber army.
Is that something that's underway? Or
it's underway, obviously. Cyber army, and to be fair, it's not only Malaysia. Even the UK government is trying to build up their cyber army. So it's a brand new defense or armed forces for the cyber landscape, like what we have for the maritime, for the air and for land and for border.
Right.
We need to have an armed forces for the cyber, the digital landscape. So that's a work in progress, obviously.
What is your biggest grievance or grievances when it comes to cybercrime and cybersecurity related matters?
My biggest grievances is sometimes I think the level of ignorance at the decision-making level. So let me be very direct. So that's been at the end of the day, there are security professionals out there, both in the public sector and in the private sector, who actually know what the problem is. But whether that message gets across to the people who actually can make that decision, who can sign the checks to get that investment to train people, for example. So that's where I think my biggest grievance is.
What seems to be the disconnect? Is it not understanding the ground issues, the technicalities?
Yeah, I think it's
threats?
I think it's a lack of understanding. It's a lack of. There is still a lot of fear towards technology. There's also obviously sometimes it's about balancing. How do you balance between the other priorities as far as nation building is concerned? So sometimes security might take a back seat. But I think that has been a general approach for many years as far as security is concerned. But I think now with what's happening and the fact that you cannot just disconnect something now, everything is connected. So one failure in the system can bring down an entire, so you can't just switch off a machine today, it's all connected.
With the Cybercrime Bill 2026, there has been kickback in which some are saying that it's a threat to free expression and privacy, that freedom of expression, and it does compromise on user privacy. As an expert weighing in, do you agree?
It's always a challenge, Jessie. Sometimes you want to balance between fundamental rights and security. It's never easy. So the only thing you can do is, I think the messaging has to be very clear. The narrative has to be very clear. You need to engage with people. You shouldn't come from an approach of, I tell you, you listen. You got to educate people why you're doing this. And then as far as freedom is concerned, I think you need to just set in some guardrails, make sure that, one person doesn't make the decision. There is always check and balance. There's proper authorization before. For example, if you were to go into a premises and take someone's stuff, it must go through a proper process. So I think that's the only thing you can do. But I think if in terms of security, today, as I said, it's control. We are not in control. And my biggest concern has always been children, the older generation, those who are differently abled. These are the people who are often left out whenever you talk about all these things.
That's right.
So someone needs to step in there to actually regulate this. But obviously, you shouldn't be overzealous when it comes to regulation. And so that's my take.
Right, but critics are also pointing out that some provisions in the bill are just too broad, and it's vaguely worded. This could create room for interpretation, i.e. misunderstanding as well. How important is legal clarity now when it comes to the bill? Are you seeing this sort of blanket general definitions? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, that's how it is. Even in the Cybersecurity Act, it is defined. If you look at the national critical information sectors that they have defined, it's all very, very wide. Financial sector, energy sector. But I think they are in the process of trying to come out with what they call codes of practice, come out with regulations that are more specific. But it definitely has to happen. It definitely has to happen, and I think that vagueness has got a lot of people worried. But as I said, it's now we need to see how it happens, because it's a bit too early to actually see what the plan is going to be, how they're going to put this on the ground, and how they're going to enforce this.
Okay, let's bring it down to ground level. How is the bill going to affect ordinary Malaysians, people like me and people like you when you are not in professional work mode, especially in terms of online safety, privacy, as well as digital responsibility?
So I think now, as far as online safety is concerned, we've also got the Online Safety Act, we've got the Online Safety Committee and all that stuff. As far as cybercrime is concerned, I think a couple of things. If you're looking at it from, I think businesses need to also wake up now. They shouldn't look at it as a threat, they should look at it as an opportunity now for them to align themselves to make sure that today when you do something, you actually think twice. If you're going to share something, you think twice. If you're going to collect data, especially if it's a large amount of data, you got to now think, okay, am I doing it properly? Is there a risk for me now if I don't store this
But in
properly?
order to ensure these guardrails as well for SMEs and businesses, does this involve cost? Does it involve investment in infrastructure? Or is it down to more training and education?
So this is something which I'm a firm believer in. You've got the people, process, technology, governance framework. Okay, the cost, if you really look at it, bulk of it today is in the technology space, because we think we buy something, we solve a problem, but we are not solving the people problem. People is basically, as you said, training, and training doesn't end just in the classroom. It's creating a culture within the organization. Okay, so that may not cost you. Okay. Processes, again, it doesn't cost you much. Coming up with clear processes, what you can do, what you can't do, and putting in that also doesn't cost you much. Governance, again, so if you look at the people, process, technology, governance framework, the cost is actually in the technology side. So if you were to tighten up these three, then it might even help you identify technology that falls within your budget. You know, if you don't have that knowledge, then you're going to just fall for every salesman who walks through the door and tells you this is the next best thing since sliced bread. You know, so that's what's happening. You know, so that's what's happening. You get carried away with the technology, and people are trying to push technology. But if you build the right people in the right decision-making places, put in the right processes, and have the right governance in place, then you may be able to actually avoid spending money on too much on technology.
So is that blueprint also applicable for macro level as we speak for the nation? I.e., what else is needed for Malaysia to build a truly resilient cyber ecosystem, one that is free of cybercrime?
Cannot be free of cybercrime, but I think a secure ecosystem, you should create that framework of having a responsible and accountable data takers and equally responsible and cautious data givers. So this is where the education comes in. Take data, but you have to be accountable for it. You want to give data, you have to be very cautious about it. So this is where I think the education, and I sincerely feel the education is start all the way from primary school today, because the 3-year-olds, trust me, they grasp things much quicker than what we were when we were 3 years old.
Second nature you know? To them, they're able to navigate.
So you need to know that how our parents used to say, don't talk to strangers when we were kids, and it's sort of like it just sticks in your mind. We need to start that education in primary school itself, telling kids, just coming up with. You gamify it, or you put it in a cartoon, and simple something that they can understand. Or you can have a small exercise in school, and to teach them about, what happens if you forward a piece of video of your colleague, and this could result in him facing this, and so you start educating them from that level. If you want to have a digitally savvy or cybersecurity savvy, society, then we should not only be talking about reskilling and upskilling, we should be talking about instilling. So that's where I think we're missing. We're not instilling at the right age. We're always talking about upskilling and reskilling, but right. It's challenging, Sometimes when you're 35 years or 40 years old, for you to just change and pivot and think differently, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's not easy. But if you start instilling at the right age, then we will start seeing the result in about 10 to 15 years time.
Well, on that note, let's begin instilling more knowledge and more education, more awareness about cybersecurity and cybercrime. As Malaysia prepares to introduce the Cybercrime Bill 2026, it is now clear that strengthening our digital resilience will require more than just new laws. It will also depend, of course, on effective enforcement, public awareness, and that shared responsibility across society. Well, this has been The Nation. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jessie CHAHAL, and make sure you keep it locked on for more conversations on issues that truly matter. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.